As the Luftwaffe lost control over the skies of Germany in the latter half of the Second World War, it could no longer provide sufficient protection against Allied aircraft. Panzer divisions were especially affected by the lack of fighter cover because they were at the center of the most intense fighting. While the Germans already had copious amounts of half-tracked anti-aircraft guns, these, being open-topped, had the significant flaw of being vulnerable to the planes they were meant to protect against. A tank-based anti-aircraft vehicle, or Flakpanzer, could solve this problem, but little effort was made in this direction. The first attempt, the Flakpanzer I, was more of an improvisation than a purpose-built vehicle. The Flakpanzer 38T and the Wirbelwind were built in some numbers but were considered unsuccessful, mostly due to the weak firepower of their 2cm Flak 38s by that stage of the war. The Mobilwagen and the Ostwind, both armed with the larger 3.7cm Flak 43, proved somewhat better vehicles but were not without their flaws. Their main problem was the lack of a fully enclosed crew compartment. This issue was to be solved by the production of a new vehicle with a fully enclosed turret, the leichte Flakpanzer IV 3cm, commonly known as Kugelblitz. Welcome to this Tank Encyclopedia video on the German leichte Flakpanzer IV Kugelblitz. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and check out our website for the full written article this video is based on, as well as hundreds of others. The history of the leichte Flakpanzer IV began with the creation of a different project attempting to provide German submarines with a better anti-aircraft system. This project was carried out by Alcat, starting in January 1944. The idea was to test a new design of a fully enclosed semi-spherical turret armed with two 3cm Mk303 cannon. Although the project was never implemented as originally intended, it would instead inspire the development of a fully protected Flakpanzer with similar armament. In May 1944, several Flakpanzer projects were shown to the General Inspector of German Armored Units, General Heinz Guderian. One of these was the leichte Flakpanzer IV sketch project of Oberleutnant Josef von Glatter-Gotz. On the insistence of General Guderian, the design and realization of a fully protected Flakpanzer began in late 1944. This vehicle was to be built using the tank chassis of the Panzer IV and a new, fully enclosed semi-spherical turret inspired by the earlier submarine project. The Panzer IV tank chassis was chosen simply because it was available in large numbers and it was becoming obsolete as a frontline combat tank. It is also likely that the tanks used for this modification would not have been newly built models, but instead, ones returned to the factory for repairs or salvaged from the front. The main armament was to be two 3cm cannons, but the option of two 2cm guns was considered for use as a temporary solution. Depending on the sources, this vehicle goes under a few different designations. It is usually called the Flakkampfpanzerwagen IV, Flakpanzer IV, or leichte Flakpanzer IV. The 3cm label is added to the name in order to differentiate it from the other anti-aircraft vehicles based on the Panzer IV chassis. The nickname Kugelblitz, German for ball lightning, is used in many sources in reference to this vehicle. However, whether this nickname is German or a post-war designation is hard to say. Original plans for the Kugelblitz production predicted that the first 5 vehicles would be built by September 1944. Then it was to increase production up to 30 vehicles by December 1944, and, by early 1945, around 100 operational vehicles were to be built. The initial vehicles were to be built by Daimler-Benz and Deutsche Eisenwerke. For many reasons, including the lack of resources and Allied bombing raids, production began only in early 1945. Production numbers were hard to find, mostly due to the fact that the main supplier of some of the vehicle's parts, the Deutsche Eisenwerke plant, near the city of Duisburg, was captured by the Allied forces. Some sources state that at least one complete model was built, with possibly a few more turrets, but other sources mention up to 5. Panzer Tracts No.12, Flak selbstfahrlafetten and Flakpanzer, written by Thomas L. Jentz, cited several seemingly trustworthy sources. One, a Daimler-Benz engineer named Ebel, stated that only 3 were fully completed. According to Rudolf Spolders, the director of Deutsche Eisenwerke, only 2 turrets were completed, which were sent to Berlin to be possibly used as static anti-aircraft emplacements. Additionally, Jentz affirmed that one complete vehicle was ready in October 1944 and that 2 more vehicles were built in March 1945. According to Walter J. Spielberger, 5 were built in February 1945. Brian Perrett mentioned half a dozen or so being built, while Duško Nešić states that 1 prototype was built in November 1944 and 2 more the next February. What can be said with certainty, though, was that at least 2 fully operational vehicles were built, as there was evidence of their existence. As already mentioned, the Kugelblitz was built using the Panzer IV tank chassis. The suspension and running gear of the base vehicle were unmodified. Most of the upper hull was unchanged from the original. The driver's front observation hatch and the hull machine gun remained. The turret ring was replaced with one taken from the Tiger I. This was necessary because of the wider size of the new turret. Because of this, the 2 hull hatches for the driver and radio operator were repositioned to avoid interference with the new installation. The front hull, directly above the driver and radio operator positions, was level with the engine deck. This differs substantially from the standard Panzer IV hull, as this part was slightly sloped. The front armor of the upper hull was 80 mm, the sides were 30 mm, and the armor that protected the engine compartment was only 20 mm. The biggest change in the design was the new enclosed semi-spherical turret with 2 3-cm cannons. This turret was fully enclosed, suspended by using gimbals, and protected by a rounded mantlet welded from 3 curved steel plates. The turret was very compact, with a diameter of only 60 centimeters. At least in theory, it could be easily adapted for use in other German armored vehicles. In practice, this was never done. The turret mantlet had 30 mm of armor, the inner semi-spherical turret 20 mm, the rear part was 30 mm, with only 10 mm on top. This relatively thin armor offered protection from most machine guns and grenades. The main weapons were 2 3-cm Mk103-38 cannon. These cannons were already in use by the Luftwaffe, but came into increasing use by the Heer as the 3-cm Flak-38. As the 2-cm weapons they had previously been using became less effective against newer Allied aircraft. In addition to better firepower, the compact size and belt-fed ammunition system proved ideal for use in an enclosed turret. The main gun was placed in a box-shaped armored casing, but it was not gas-tight, although it was possible that this is planned to be gas-tight in the future. Due to the large amount of powder smoke produced by these cannons, the installation of good fume extractor fans was important. The guns were mounted in an oscillating turret with 7 degrees depression and 80 degrees of elevation. The guns were activated by trigger chains connected to the commander's foot pedals. Initially, the turret was to have manual traverse using reduction gears, but this proved to be a slow process. The turret traverse speed was only 10 degrees per second and the elevation was only 7 or 8 degrees per second. As this vehicle was designed to fight fast and nimble ground attack aircraft, this was insufficient, so a hydraulic mechanism controlling the traverse and elevation by a pair of sticks was fitted, increasing speed. The maximum rotating speed was 60 degrees per second. The maximum rate of fire was 250 rounds per minute, but 150 rounds per minute was the more typical rate. The total ammunition load for this weapon was 1,200 rounds. The spent cases fell into canvas bags under the guns. The order for redesigning and installing the new 3-cm cannons into the turret was given to the Ostbausägen in September 1944. The crew consisted of a commander/gunner, 2 gunner assistants, a driver, and a radio operator. The positions of the radio operator and the driver were the same as in the original Panzer IV. The remaining 3 crew members were positioned in the turret. The commander-gunner was positioned in the middle, behind the main guns, whilst the gunner assistants were placed to the left and right in front of him. The crew member left of the guns was responsible for the turret's movements, and the one on the right was responsible for loading. Spare ammunition was located on the right side. Each of these 3 crew members had hatches that they could use to enter or exit the vehicle. The gunner assistant's hatch doors had a small rounded hatch, which were also used for setting devices. The commander had a small observation cupola on top of the turret, equipped with a periscope for finding targets. The small size of the hatches made entering and exiting the vehicle difficult. In the turret rear, the mantlet was partially elevated, possibly for better rear protection of the commander when his hatch was opened. This, combined with the position of the commander's hatch, made escape almost impossible when the turret was at high elevation. The turret crew's seats were fixed to the turret, and so they moved with it. All produced vehicles were given to the newly formed Panzerflak-Ersatz- und Ausbildungsabteilung, that is, the Armoured Flak Training and Replacement Battalion, located near the city of Ohrdruf. One company was divided into 3 platoons equipped with a mix of different Flakpanzers. The first platoon was equipped with the Wirbelwind, the second with the Ostwind, and the third platoon was intended to be equipped with experimental vehicles, such as the Kugelblitz. The fate of all produced Kugelblitz Flakpanzers is not known. What is known from photographic evidence is that at least 2 were used in combat and were destroyed. 1 or more vehicles were sent to Berlin, and during the final Soviet assault on the German capital, all were lost. A photo taken on 11th June 1945 shows 1 destroyed Kugelblitz in Berlin. It is identified as a Kugelblitz because of the position of the front hull, right above the driver's position, which is totally flat in contrast to a slightly sloped shape found in regular Panzer IVs. 1 was used against Allied forces in the West, at the end of March and the beginning of April 1945. As American forces advanced through central parts of Germany, they came to a small village called Spielberger. This village was surrounded by the Werner River, and the only way across was through a partially destroyed bridge connected to a power plant. This bridge was defended by a few anti-tank guns, some Panzer IIIs, and 1 Kugelblitz. All were located on Spatenberg Hill near this village. An American reconnaissance force was sent to investigate and to find a place where a river crossing would be possible. This unit came under German fire and was forced to pull out with some losses. The American response was to bomb the village and nearby hill. In the following battle, the Kugelblitz was destroyed and its remains were discovered in 1999. In conclusion, the Kugelblitz was definitely an improvement, in the case of crew protection, over previous Flakpanzers already in use. It had good firepower with its 2 3-cm cannons, good mobility, and solid protection. It had a much lower silhouette than the Wirbelwind, for example, making it a less visible target. As a design, it was certainly impressive and innovative. The biggest downside was the fact that it was never properly tested to see if the whole design was workable and efficient. Even if it had been built in larger numbers, it was simply too little too late. By the time it was ready for production, the war was already lost for Germany. This concludes Tank Encyclopedia's video on the German leichte Flakpanzer Wehr. We hope you liked it. Don't forget to check out our website and our Patreon, and until next time, keep us in your sights.